Are you about to watch a Godzilla movie?
Yes, of course.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Are you about to watch this Godzilla movie?
Yes!
Did you know before we got this Godzilla that we almost had this Godzilla?
Wait,
what?
Well, put on your rubber suit and strap into Mechagodzilla and Super X because you're about to learn about the Godzilla that could have been, the unproduced TriStar movie. Screenplay Synopsis. Movies, even ones that go unproduced like this one, I think still have a story that's worth hearing. So here it is, the story for the unproduced TriStar Godzilla movie. This synopsis is pulled from the first draft before any rewrites have been done. I went with the first draft because I enjoyed reading it the most and felt it helped me envision the movie the director and screenwriters wanted to bring to its audiences. A salvage ship in the remote location off the frozen coast of Alaska is retrieving nuclear reactor cores that had been illegally dumped at sea a long time ago by the Soviet Union. Something suddenly goes wrong and an explosion destroys the ship, while on shore the huge snowbanks catch fire and a giant crevice opens up with a strange red-black liquid oozing out, which resembles blood. The military launches a top-secret investigation of the fissure while also carting away drums full of the red-black liquid, which tests show resembles amniotic fluid. See, there are going to be pretty pictures to look at, not just the words you see on the screen that I'm reading to you. U.S. government scientist Keith Llewellyn. Seriously, I did practice saying that name and thought I had it down. I guess I was wrong. You know what? I'm just calling him Keith and going to use first names for all the other characters once they get introduced to make things easier on me. So as I was saying, Keith regrettably leaves his wife Jill and daughter Tina when he's called in as part of the team to investigate the cavern where the blood had been oozing from. In the cavern, Keith finds a huge stalactite formation and discovers they are actually the claws of a giant creature embedded in the sediment. Keith finds the perfectly preserved head of the creature, which is a giant dinosaur, and climbs on top of its nose and stares down the length of its 247-foot-long body. I don't know about you, but if I was Keith, the first thing I wouldn't think to do is climb up on a giant dinosaur I just found in a mysterious ice cavern that had recently opened up. The creature suddenly awakens and the investigation team is unintentionally crushed when it breaks free from the ice, destroys the entire military camp that had been set up near the cavern, and then heads into the sea. Soon after, the dinosaur appears on the Kurita Islands near Japan and destroys a village. A fisherman who sees this attack believes the creature is a legendary monster called Godzilla. 12 years later, Aaron Vaught, a pseudoscientist whose theories about dinosaurs and dragons have made him a best-selling author, and his assistant, Marty Kenoshita, sneak into a mental hospital in Japan to see the fisherman, whose name is Junji, who saw Godzilla. Aaron is shown by Junji a picture he drew of Godzilla fighting another monster, a griffin, leading Aaron and Marty to theorize that if Godzilla exists, he must have an enemy. Military police then arrive to escort Aaron and Marty out of Japan, who think they're being apprehended for sneaking into the hospital, but it's actually because the government has a mission for them. Meanwhile, a huge fireball plunges into Lake Apopka in Kentucky, causing fish and frogs to rain on a nearby town. Jill, the widow of Keith, is now director of the top-secret St. George Project in Massachusetts, which is a military effort to find Godzilla who had last been seen 6 years ago when he destroyed an oil tanker. Jill isn't happy when she learns Aaron, who she considers a folklorist, will be co-director of the St. George Project with her because Jill's superiors believe Aaron's popularity will help the project get funding from Congress. Jill also receives a call from the base police that Tina, who's now 16, has been detained for trying to steal a car. At the Godzilla womb site in Alaska, a military installation has been established, and two guards see streams of strange light illuminating the sky that's coming from an unexplored ice cave. Simultaneously, a metallic yet alive alien probe stirs at the bottom of Lake Apopka. The probe flows like liquid chrome into a cave and absorbs dozens of bats, forming them into a creature with a 12-foot wingspan called probe bats, and sends them out of the cave into the night sky. Here is concept art of the cave that becomes Griffin's den and the probe bats. Aaron, Jill, and Marty fly to Alaska and discover amniotic fluid is flowing again from Godzilla's womb. Aaron deduces the amniotic fluid is flowing again because this was the time Godzilla was supposed to reawaken, but something caused him to be released prematurely. If I was a gambling man, which I'm not, my money would be on the salvage ship that exploded at the beginning of the story being the culprit. That, and probably the nuclear reactor cores that had been dumped and were being retrieved in the area. The trio enters the newly opened ice cave lined with strange organic formations that's a remnant of an ancient civilization with advanced biotechnology. No one, not even Marty, notices a microscopic organism swoop down and burrow into Marty's neck. Now, another chain of events occur. In Kentucky, milk cows in a stable are slaughtered. The limbs and organs have been removed from their carcasses. And, in the Pacific, Godzilla capsizes 3 fishing boats when he swims beneath them at 40 knots while pursuing a school of fish. For those who aren't familiar with knots, which is a measure of speed at sea, Godzilla is going about 46 miles per hour. That's pretty fast in my opinion considering how big Godzilla is. Godzilla is sighted again when he passes beneath an oil tanker, and the military determines he's heading to San Francisco. Back in Alaska, Aaron and Jill go to the command post at the military installation, and Marty becomes ill and is taken away for medical care. Meanwhile, the military tries intercepting Godzilla with 2 missile carriers, a battleship, and submarine, but receive a crushing defeat from Godzilla, who finishes off the ships by using his atomic breath to turn the hulls into molten metal. The military wants to use a small nuclear device to destroy Godzilla, but Aaron advises against it. He believes Godzilla is a living, breathing nuclear reactor due to Godzilla not breathing fire, but something so hot it ionizes oxygen. And there it is. A Godzilla movie wouldn't feel right without this concept worked in. Godzilla has always had a close relationship with nuclear radiation, so it's no surprise it wouldn't be any different in this story. Jill concludes the red-black liquid that was thought to be amniotic fluid isn't food, but actually a tranquilizer to keep Godzilla in hibernation. Barrels of the red-black fluid are sent to San Francisco and sprayed on the surface of the water entering the bay using fire trucks. When Godzilla swims into the fluid, he bolts upright, slowly goes ashore, and then collapses near the Golden Gate Bridge. The military secures the unconscious Godzilla and transports him using 6 super helicopters to a huge hangar at the St. George Project facility in Massachusetts. Tina sneaks into the hangar and realizes her mom's job for the past 12 years has been hunting Godzilla for killing her dad. Tina tells her mom that Godzilla is a force of nature that should be respected. Jill then sends Tina to Manhattan to stay with her aunt. At the military hospital, Marty has developed an infection which has become worse and has consumed his internal organs, and whatever infected him is taking over his body and speaks through him. Before dying, Marty tells Jill of an alien race that sends out probes to help them colonize the universe. The probes consume the native life of target planets and create a doomsday beast from the genetic material, and all life is wiped out by the time the aliens arrive. An ancient biotech Earth civilization guarded itself against these probes by creating Godzilla from dinosaur genes and placing him in suspended animation to reawaken when a probe arrived and destroy it before it could reproduce. Meanwhile, in Kentucky, the probe bats keep absorbing genetic material and bring it back to the cave where mysterious creatures slowly taking shape. Aaron, after hearing Marty's story, realizes Godzilla was heading where the huge fireball landed and travels to Kentucky. Aaron is driven to Lake Apopka by a local storekeeper named Nelson Fleer, and they use scuba gear to explore the bottom of the lake. Aaron and Nelson discover a tunnel leading to a series of caves, and Aaron finds what appears to be a giant paw and discovers it's attached to Griffin, a giant monster with the body of a cougar, wings of a bat, and a tongue of snakes that the probe had created. The Griffin awakens when Nelson's scuba tank clanks against a rock, and Aaron and Nelson submerge and swim to safety. Aaron and Nelson reach the surface of the lake, and then Griffin also emerges from the lake and flies away, where it then derails a train, killing people, and fires energy bolts that explode a gasoline storage tank. Back in Massachusetts, Godzilla awakens due to sensing Griffin's awakening, even though he's still being force-fed the amniotic fluid. He proceeds to destroy the hangar, walks to the shore, and goes into the water. It's determined that Godzilla and Griffin are heading straight for each other, and holding their course, New York City will be the location of their showdown. Jill drives to Manhattan, which is being evacuated, to save Tina, and is briefly trapped underwater when Godzilla steps on the Queens Midtown Tunnel, and after reaching dry land, Godzilla's foot narrowly misses stepping on her. As Godzilla and Griffin's battle begins, Jill finds Tina, and they try to figure out how to safely get off the island. As the battle between the monsters continues, whatever injuries Godzilla inflicts on Griffin heal instantly. Aaron, who has arrived in New York City with Nelson and met up with Jill and Tina, says Godzilla can't beat Griffin due to a tank of amniotic fluid that is still planted in his neck that's preventing Godzilla from using his atomic breath. Aaron and Nelson are able to destroy the tank thanks to gunship helicopters diverting Griffin's attention and Jill and Tina crashing a gasoline tanker into Griffin. Godzilla is now able to gain the upper hand and kills Griffin when it flies at him by slicing it open with its dorsal plates, pulling Griffin into the East River, ripping off its head, and using his atomic breath to set Griffin's body on fire. Godzilla, who is badly injured, roars victoriously and sets out to sea. Air Force jets fly in to attack Godzilla to try to kill him, but Jill convinces the military commander to call them off, having forgiven Godzilla. Aaron, Jill, Nelson, and Tina watch from the shore as Godzilla goes home. The people. After listening to the story to this movie, you might be wondering who some of the people were that were working to produce it. The director was going to be Jan de Bont, known for his work on Die Hard, Lethal Weapon 3, Speed, and Twister. De Bont became interested in the project due to being a fan of the Toho films. This was after the project had been turned down by directors like Roland Emmerich, who wasn't a big Godzilla fan and saw the films as kids' movies you laughed at, and Ridley Scott. Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio, who are known for their work on Aladdin, the Pirates of the Caribbean series, and Small Soldiers, wrote the screenplay. Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton were considered for the leads and starred in Twister, which Jan de Bont directed after leaving Godzilla. Don't worry, I'll get into the reason why de Bont left later on. Ricardo Delgado did the concepts for Godzilla, while Carlos Huante was responsible for the concepts of Griffin and the probe bats. Here, you can see some of Ricardo's concept art for Godzilla. The drawing on the right was a final concept design for Godzilla that maintained the traditional look of the monster mixed with the realistic anatomy of a dinosaur. Stan Winston Studios was going to do the special effects for this unproduced Godzilla film. Here you can see their unfinished maquette for Godzilla. This is an unfinished maquette done by Carlos Huante for Godzilla's adversary, Griffin. Here's another maquette of Griffin that was done by Mark Maitre at Stan Winston Studios. And this is the maquette for the probe bats done by Bruce Spalding Fuller, also at Stan Winston Studios. What happened? After hearing the original screenplay synopsis, learning about some of the people involved, and seeing the designs for the monsters, which I think looked really good, you might be wondering, why did this Godzilla movie go unproduced by TriStar? Sony Pictures was dealing with a number of costly flops and repeatedly deferring their box office failures, so they had a loss of $250 million by the first half of 1994. I'll Do Anything, budget $44 million. Box office $10 million. North, budget $40 million. Box office $7 million. City Slickers 2, box office $43 million. Huge drop from the first film's $178 million take. Bruce Willis's Striking Distance, budget $30 million. Box office $24 million. Arnold Schwarzenegger's Last Action Hero, $85 million production that lost the studio $25 million. Geronimo, An American Legend, reportedly lost $40 million. The production department estimated the budget for Godzilla would cost $140 to $180 million. The studio refused to spend more than $100 million, which was a defensive budget because the studio was inflating the film's cost due to their financial and managerial issues. They were looking at the $140 million budget with all the effects, which included a fully CGI Godzilla that would be in almost every shot, and tacked on 30%, so they were thinking the movie was going to cost them $200 million. The studio also wanted a less Japanese interpretation of Godzilla that they felt would appeal to a wider audience. Jan de Bont wanted to keep the character of Godzilla and not create a new Americanized Godzilla because he felt it didn't fit any story. He felt that Godzilla was an iconic character and drastically changing him was undermining the character. Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio revised the screenplay, bringing the projected cost down to $120 million, with $50 million devoted to special effects. Terry Rossio observed that studios always have issues with a movie's budget. The line manager for the project took a page from their script saying it was a $6 million page. It was part of Godzilla and Griffin's final battle in and around the World Trade Center in New York. At this time, Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio were oddly proud of writing a $6 million page. Terry Rossio's recollection of Jan de Bont's Godzilla project was, started with a budget around $150 million, and de Bont was told to make it for $145 million. De Bont made cuts, submitted the budget, and then was told to make the film for $140 million. More cuts were made, submitted the budget again, and then was told to make the film for $135 million. DeBont quit or was persuaded to leave after asking the studio for a final budget and a green light, and they wouldn't give him that, and the project entered development hell. After DeBont's departure, a TriStar rep told Variety magazine that the Godzilla project was going to be reconceived and the budget wouldn't go over $100 million because anything more than $100 million was too much. TriStar eventually handed Godzilla over to Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich, who drafted a new script and redesigned Godzilla. Their official budget was listed at $136 million, but the actual budget was put at $150 million, with an additional $80 million spent on worldwide marketing. That's a budget of $230 million. Obviously, that's way more than the $100 million the studio wanted to spend on this project. It should be noted that Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio's screenplay had fewer big effects scenes than Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich's Godzilla. Final thoughts. Face it, you should have already realized you were going to hear them whether you wanted to or not. And if you stuck around this long already, you might as well hear me out. Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich's Godzilla isn't my favorite Godzilla movie, but I think it's still a decent giant monster movie. If you want to know what my favorite Godzilla movies are, feel free to ask. I can't say that Devlin and Emmerich's Godzilla is a bad movie, considering I saw it in theaters about 5 to 6 times when it came out, bought it on VHS, and then bought it again on DVD years later when I transitioned my Godzilla movie collection over from VHS to DVDs and Blu-rays. When Devlin and Emmerich's Godzilla came out, I learned for the first time that Godzilla's original name in Japanese is Gojira, so props to this movie for teaching me something about the character I didn't already know. The only things I learned or observed from the Toho Godzilla movies as a kid were: space aliens can't be trusted, as they're usually trying to conquer the Earth with the help of King Ghidorah or Mechagodzilla. Giant monsters / kaiju seem to be commonplace in the world of Godzilla movies, but everyone always seems to be surprised when they show up and destroy cities like Tokyo or Osaka. Japan is really good at quickly rebuilding their cities and infrastructure after giant monster / kaiju attacks between the movies. After the Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich Godzilla, the rights to Godzilla reverted back to Toho due to TriStar not making sequels, so Toho was able to start making traditional Godzilla movies again, starting with Godzilla 2000, which was the first Toho Godzilla movie I got to see in theaters. Godzilla fans did get Godzilla the series, which in my eyes redeems Devlin and Emmerich's Godzilla, aka Gino, Godzilla in name only, or now called Zilla by Toho, due to Godzilla fighting a new monster each episode, which is similar to Toho's Godzilla movies of Godzilla fighting a new monster each movie, and the adversary monsters Godzilla fought in the TV show had some good designs. I also think it was a nice touch that Godzilla's series managed to work the Godzilla from Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich's movie in as Cyber Godzilla to pay homage to Godzilla's classic adversary, Mechagodzilla. Toho taking back Godzilla until an American studio could portray the character correctly might have played a part in us getting Legendary's 2014 Godzilla and the MonsterVerse it started, along with what looks to be a resurgence in giant monster / kaiju movies. No one knows what would have happened if Yondaban's Godzilla had been made, but if it had, Toho may not have been able to make their Millennium series of Godzilla films, a few of which I consider to be among my favorite Godzilla movies. Part of me feels DeBon's Godzilla project going unproduced might have been a good thing. I think Godzilla, along with other giant monster / kaiju movies, have been able to benefit more on the big screen from today's ever-improving CGI that will hopefully hold up better and longer for future giant monster / kaiju movie fans to appreciate. First, I need to thank Sci-Fi Japan for the wealth of information, far more than I delved into, that made it possible for me to do this video. I highly recommend checking out the 4 parts of the article they did if you'd like to learn more about this movie. Links will be in the description below. Also, a special thanks to the Giant Monster / Kaiju podcast I listen to, the Kaiju Cast, and Tokyo Lives. Without them, I would never have been aware of this unproduced Godzilla movie, along with the SciFiJapan.com article I used as my resource. My friends Brian, Chris, Colleen, and Mike for participating in the intro, and my Bad Movie Night comrades Aaron, Alex, and Josh for patiently waiting a month for me to complete this video as our pre-show entertainment before watching Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich's Godzilla. Now after listening to such a heavy topic, it's time for something else that's still Godzilla related, but way more lighthearted.
Hey man, who's that cat coming down the street?
I don't know, but it sounds to me like that Griffin man with the bone.
Sure having himself a ball.